Hey everybody, welcome to JSTTV Designs. For this week's episode of JSDTV, I want to talk about the forward shoulder term and pattern adjustment and also body type. It came up in my class that I teach on pattern review, the perfectly fitted shirt, that a couple of the students were confused about the adjustment of forward shoulder. Throughout my career of learning to do pattern adjusting and, working with patterns, the term forward shoulder had always referred to a seam, the shoulder seam, and whether or not it sat forward of the center of your shoulder. So in the class, I have an adjustment and I show how to adjust the pattern to get the shoulder seam to sit in the center of the shoulder. And I call that forward shoulder adjustment because usually on people, the seam will sit more in the front versus in the center. And a lot of times it's perfectly fine at the tip of the shoulder, but then as it goes towards the neck, it comes forward. And that's why I think it's called a forward shoulder pattern adjustment. The question and the confusion came up with considering a forward shoulder as a body type. Let me explain to you about this body type. It's when the ball of your shoulder actually points to the front versus being centered across the width of your body. So if I turn to the side a little bit and I put my arm behind me, I can sort of push my shoulder, the ball of my shoulder forward a little bit. And so if I leave my neck here, you can see that it's a little bit pointing forward versus lined with my, my shoulder blades and my clavicle and all that other stuff. So if you have a rotated or, I don't want to say protruding, but if the ball of your shoulder is pointing forward, that would be a forward shoulder joint, or the ball of your shoulder is sitting forward. And the interesting thing about this adjustment is it's basically opposite of how I would adjust for a forward shoulder fixing the shoulder seam. So let's start with if you need to get your shoulder seam to be aligned with the center of your shoulder from the tip of your shoulder to your neck edge. And usually, but not always, usually it's fine at the tip of the shoulder and it tends to come forward on you, so you have to back it up. Okay, but it could be that you have to back the whole seam up or, a little bit on either side of the shoulder. But basically the idea is, I've got some half scale pattern pieces here. All right, so here's a half scale front bodice. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say for this example, this side of my shoulder seam is sitting 1/2 inch forward of my center of my shoulder at the neck edge. So what you're going to want to do then is you're going to want to push the neck edge of the shoulder seam to the back because if it's sitting forward. So basically what you would do is you'd measure the amount that it's forward, and let's say for this example it's forward 1/2 inch. So basically what I would do is I would extend the neckline edge up 1/2 inch, and I would just make a little guide right there. And then what I would do is just connect that back to the original shoulder. Okay, so see what that's doing is it's pushing the seam back. Okay, but it's doing nothing at the tip of the shoulder because in a lot of cases that would be, that's usually in a good position. If it wasn't though, you could also shift that as well. So just know that you could do this adjustment of pushing it back on both sides or just one side, depending on what you need to do to fix it on your pattern. The back shoulder then, what you'd have to do is do the adjustment in reverse. The first thing I want to do to this, and this is just interesting, I'm just going to rotate this dart to the waist dart so to get rid of it so it's a simple shoulder seam. And basically to do that, I'm just going to draw a line between the tips of the darts like that. And then I'm just going to cut out or cut one leg of both of these and connect this in the middle. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shut this. Okay, and then that's just going to open up the waist dart a little bit, and I would true that back up. Let me just redraw the waist dart. All right, so just to close that shoulder dart, okay, let me just true that up. Okay. All right, so to complete the forward shoulder, what I would do is, because I added a 1/2 inch in the front, I would take a 1/2 inch away in the back. And because this is a half scale pattern, it's going to look really funny. It's going to make my neckline look very, very tiny. But essentially what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure down a 1/2 inch, which would put me right here. And then I'm just going to do the reverse. So I'm getting rid of it there, and I'm adding it here. So if I put these together, okay, it's going to look like this. All right, so basically you can see what we've done is we've shifted the shoulder seam from here to here. So that's basically how you get your shoulder seam to line up with the center of your shoulder. Okay, so that's the forward shoulder pattern adjustment when you're talking about the shoulder seam. Now, in comparison, if you have a shoulder or ball of your shoulder that's pushed forward, then you need to accommodate that shape in your front and back bodice pieces. And you're going to actually do the reverse of what I just showed you to fix that. And just to keep it easy for our example, let's use a 1/2 inch as the amount we have to make this adjustment. So I have another set of front and back pattern pieces, and the interesting thing is the adjustment for this forward shoulder, or the ball of your shoulder forward, is going to take place on the armhole side of things and not the neckline side of things. So when I adjusted the other one, we moved the neckline side of the shoulder seam back. In this case, we're going to deal with the tip of the shoulder side of the shoulder seam. And in the front, we're going to measure down a 1/2 inch like this. And we're going to redraw our shoulder seam like this. Okay, and that's going to be to get rid of the fabric you don't need in the front because the ball of your shoulder is forward. And then in the back, you have to make room for the fact that the back bodice has to come forward a greater distance than if it was sitting straight. Because we have to add to the armhole and the length of the shoulder to accommodate the forward sitting shoulder in the back, it's really helpful to have this shoulder dart because that will give us a place to put the extra length that's going to be created by the adjustment. Let me show you what I mean by that. The first thing I want to do is I want to add a quick seam allowance here because I want to show you the seam method of making this adjustment. And the seam method is when you actually slash the pattern along the sewing line and then pull the pattern piece out to reflect the change you need to make. I like to do this method for certain kinds of adjustments because it makes it easy to see what you're doing. And this is one of the adjustments that I think this works well with. So I've added my 1/2 inch seam allowance here, and I know it looks really big because I'm working with a half scale pattern, but you'll see what I mean in a minute. I'm going to put my back notch for my armhole right there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to clip and slash this pattern. So I have to add to the back of the shoulder along the armhole as well as the shoulder. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to slash my sewing line right along the top part of the armhole and through the dart, and I'm going to cut to but not through the neckline edge. And I want to clip right to but not through my notch in my armhole. I want to clip through the corner of my shoulder like this. All right, I want to clip through my shoulder dart to the base of my dart. Let me just do that. All right, now what this is going to allow me to do is open up the pattern to accommodate the back shoulder. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by at the notch of the armhole, and I'm going to just open this up so that it opens approximately a 1/2 inch up at the tip of the shoulder. So I'm letting this clip close. I'm just going to tape that so it doesn't go anywhere. Then I'm going to also open up my shoulder, and I really don't want to add to the corner, so I'm just going to keep that careful like this. So I'm adding almost a 1/2 inch there as well. If I was working with a full scale pattern, it'd be easier to make this big of an adjustment. But basically, see how I'm spreading that away? And because I've got the dart in the middle of the shoulder, it's not really affecting the neckline. But what we're going to do for the neckline is we're basically going to just clip that a little bit and allow it to curve up a little bit. Okay, and that'll give this a little bit of the contour you need for the shoulder. All right, so I'm going to just tape that. Okay, so now basically what I would do is I would redraw this shoulder seam. And again, because I'm working with a 1/2 scale pattern, a 1/2 inch is a huge adjustment for it. So basically, let me just put a piece of paper in here so you can see. You know, if this was a full-size pattern, this dart would not be as affected. But essentially, you know, you would need to take that back in. So let me just draw it, even though it's gigantic. Okay, so, and then what you would do is you would basically curve this up to match. Okay, so you could shut it. So you would curve up to make sure that the dart legs were the same length. Okay, and then you could shut it. All right, so basically, see how you would curve from the neck edge up to the new height of your shoulder, and it would create this shape. And let me just cut it off so you can see the shape it would create. All right, so that would be the shape of the shoulder, and this would be the dart intake. Okay, so when you shut that up, okay, you could then sew that to your sloping front. Okay, and it would look something like that. And then that would give you the room through here for the back of the ball of the shoulder that's pulling a little bit to the front. So that's the adjustment you would make for a forward shoulder body style. Because we changed the back armhole, we would also have to change the cap of the sleeve. And for Quick Tip Thursday, I'm going to quickly show you how to make the corresponding adjustment on your sleeve. Okay, everybody, that's it for me. I'm in a hurry to get off the camera because I want to start working on my Ponte Knit jean muslins. I'm using the fabric that I got in New York last week, and I'm excited to tell you that I'm scheduled to teach the Ponte Knit jean workshop at Barron Sewing Center in California in March. And what I'll do is I'll put a link and all the information for that workshop in the blog post that goes along with this video. So if any of you are interested in attending that, I would be super happy to see you. I think it's going to be a really fun time. So check that out, as well as, you know, if you have any questions or comments, you can post those as well. And I'll see you for Quick Tip Thursday when I show you how to adjust the sleeve to go along with this pattern adjustment if you have a forward ball of your shoulder. Okay, so have a nice day, everybody.